You spent $1,400 on a log splitter last October. You did your research, or at least you thought you did. You watched a few videos, read a handful of reviews on a site that turned out to be mostly sponsored content, and you walked into that big box store feeling like you knew what you were looking for. The guy in the orange vest pointed you toward the display floor model, told you it was their best seller, and you loaded it into the truck feeling good about yourself. Then February hit. You had 4 cords stacked in the yard, a wood stove that heats half your house, and a machine that was cycling so slow you could have split half that wood by hand before you finished the pile. Then the hydraulic seal started weeping fluid by March, and by the time the warranty process was done, the season was over, you were out the cost of shipping and a service fee they buried in the fine print, and you were standing in your driveway holding a machine that owed you money it would never pay back. That is not bad luck. That is what happens when the equipment industry figures out that most buyers only buy once, and that the cost of a return is cheaper than the cost of engineering something that actually lasts. They have done the math. You are the variable they already accounted for. If this is the kind of thing nobody tells you at the equipment dealer, subscribe to Split and Saw, because every single video on this channel exists to give you the real answer before you spend $1 you cannot get back. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss it. Now let me tell you about a machine that most people have never heard of, and that is exactly the problem. The Splitfire 2265 is not sitting on an end cap at your nearest home improvement warehouse. You will not see it in a glossy catalog next to a guy in clean flannel who has clearly never split a cord in his life. It is not the brand that spent $40 million last year on advertising to make sure you recognized the name when you walked through that sliding glass door. Splitfire built its reputation the way most honest things get built in this country, quietly, through the hands of people who actually work for a living and who do not have time to go back to a dealer twice in the same season. Splitfire as a company has its roots in the kind of no-nonsense equipment culture that used to define this industry before private equity got involved and started optimizing everything for margin instead of longevity. The brand was built around the idea that a log splitter is a working tool, not a consumer product. There is a difference, and it matters more than most people realize until they have already learned the hard way. A consumer product is engineered to a price point. A working tool is engineered to a standard. One of them is designed by accountants who are trying to hit a number. The other one is designed by people who understand that a hydraulic cylinder that fails in the 3rd season is not a cost savings. It is a broken promise. The 2265 is a 22-ton gas-powered machine. And before you say that 22 tons sounds like a lot for residential use, let me explain why that number actually matters more than the people selling 10 and 12-ton splitters want you to know. Hydraulic force in a log splitter is not about brute strength for its own sake. It is about what happens when you hit a knotty red oak in the middle of a cold morning, when the wood is tight and the grain is running in 3 directions at once. A 10-ton machine will stall on that piece. It will push, strain, release, and leave you manually reversing and repositioning the log 3 or 4 times before it finally gives. That costs time, and time is money if you are heating with wood at scale, or if you are a firewood dealer trying to move product before the season closes. The 2265 hits that same piece with 22 tons of consistent hydraulic pressure and does not ask permission. It splits through the knot because it has the force to do what wood sometimes requires. The engine powering the 2265 is a 208cc overhead valve unit. And that distinction matters for durability in a way that gets almost no coverage in the mainstream equipment press. Overhead valve design, sometimes called OHV, positions the intake and exhaust valves in the engine head above the piston, rather than in the engine block beside it. This sounds like inside baseball until you understand what it actually produces in the real world. An OHV engine runs cooler, breathes better, and produces more usable torque at lower RPM than the older flathead or side valve designs that still show up in cheaper equipment. Running cooler means less thermal stress on the piston rings and cylinder walls over time, which translates directly to engine longevity. More torque at lower RPM means the hydraulic pump attached to that engine is being driven more efficiently, which means your cycle times stay consistent even after you have been running the machine hard for 3 hours. The 2265 delivers a 25-second full cycle time under working conditions. And that number holds up over time because the engine is not being asked to work at the edge of its capability to produce it. Before we keep going, I want to ask you something, and I want you to actually answer this in the comments below. Have you ever spent real money on a log splitter or a chainsaw, taken it home, put it to work, and watched it fall apart in the 1st season? Because if that happened to you, you are not alone, and you are not stupid for trusting the brand on the label. Drop a comment right now and just say, "I got burned." That is it. 3 words. Because every person who reads that comment is going to feel less alone, and you are going to help somebody else avoid making the same mistake. I read every single comment on this channel. Now back to the 2265, because there is more here that deserves your attention. The machine operates in both horizontal and vertical positions, and that is not just a feature checkbox. That is a fundamental decision about how serious the manufacturer is about the real conditions of actual use. Horizontal splitting is fine when your logs are small enough to lift comfortably and your back is cooperating. But when you are running through a pile of 24-inch rounds cut from a 30-year-old silver maple that fell across your back property line last spring, some of those pieces are going to weigh 60 or 70 pounds or more. Bending over to set a log on a horizontal beam, and then lifting it back off, round after round after round, for 2 or 3 hours, is how you end your splitting season early and start a conversation with a physical therapist. The vertical position lets you stand the round up on the ground, position the splitting wedge over it, and let the machine do the work without your lower back paying the price. The fact that the 2265 does both, with a conversion that takes less than a minute to execute, is the kind of practical engineering that comes from people who have actually used equipment in the real world, instead of just designed it in a lab. The beam on the 2265 is constructed from heavy-gauge steel in a full I-beam configuration, and that matters for a reason most buyers never think about until they start watching the cheaper machines flex under load. An I-beam is not just stronger than a C-channel or a square tube. It is stronger in the specific direction that a log splitter needs strength, which is resisting the bending force created when hydraulic pressure pushes a wedge through a log that is not perfectly centered on the beam. Every time you split an off-center piece, or every time the grain pulls the wedge sideways through a knot, that beam is absorbing a twisting and bending force. Do that 10,000 times over 3 seasons with a beam that was built to a price instead of a standard, and you will start to see deflection, flex, and eventually fatigue cracking at the welds. The I-beam on the 2265 is not there to impress anyone on a spec sheet. It is there because the people who built this machine understood the physics of what a log splitter actually experiences over its working life. The hydraulic system on the 2265 runs a 2-stage pump, and this is one of the details that separates machines built for working use from machines built for the showroom floor. A 2-stage hydraulic pump operates in high flow at low pressure during the approach phase of the splitting cycle, which means the wedge reaches the log quickly and without wasting engine energy pushing against nothing. When the wedge contacts the wood and resistance builds, the pump automatically shifts to high pressure at lower flow, delivering maximum splitting force right when it is needed. This is not complicated technology. It has been around for decades, but it requires better components and more precise manufacturing tolerances than a single-stage pump, which means it costs more to build. The machines you find at big box stores are almost universally running single-stage pumps, because single-stage pumps are cheaper, and cheaper is what hits the price point that moves units off the floor. The 2265 uses a 2-stage system because the engineers who built it were optimizing for performance over time, not for a number on a hang tag. The log catcher on the 2265 is another detail that tells you something about who this machine was designed for. After a wedge drives through a round, the split pieces fall. Where they fall matters when you are working alone, which is most of the time if you are a serious homeowner or small-scale firewood producer. A good log catcher positions the split pieces so that you can restage them for a secondary split without having to bend down to the ground to retrieve them. A cheap log catcher, or no log catcher at all, means you are bending down hundreds of times over the course of a working session. The catcher on the 2265 is positioned and angled to keep split pieces in the working zone, which sounds like a minor convenience until you have spent 6 hours splitting and you realize your back is fine because the machine was actually designed around how humans work. The tow hitch on the 2265 is a standard 2-inch receiver ball coupler, which means you can move this machine with any full-size pickup or SUV without adapter hardware or custom hitches. The pneumatic tires are sized to handle uneven ground, gravel, and the kind of terrain you find on a working property where the driveway ends and the real work begins. The weight distribution is balanced for towing stability, so the machine does not wag behind you on a country road. These are not glamorous specifications. They are the specifications of a machine that was designed to go where the wood is, not to sit in a climate-controlled garage waiting for the weekend. The people who actually own and use the 2265 are not the people you see in equipment advertising. They are the guys cutting their own firewood to heat 2,000 square feet of house through a Minnesota winter without writing a check to the propane company. They are the small firewood dealers in rural Pennsylvania and upstate New York who are running through 8 or 10 cords a week during peak season and cannot afford a breakdown in November. They are the property managers and land clearing operations who need a machine that works every day, not just most days. They are the serious homeowners who tried the cheap route once, paid for it, and decided they were done gambling with equipment that was designed by people who would never have to use it. What keeps the 2265 off the mainstream radar is also what makes it worth knowing about. Splitfire does not have the advertising budget that the big names do. They are not sponsoring segments on morning television or placing units in hardware store displays in every major metro market. Their growth has come from word of mouth inside the communities that actually use this kind of equipment, from the recommendation a firewood dealer in Vermont made to his neighbor, from the post in a homesteading forum where someone asked what machine held up and 3 people said the same name without any prompting. That kind of reputation takes longer to build than an advertising campaign, and it is worth more when it gets there. The 2265 is priced in a range that reflects its actual build quality, which means it costs more than the machines stacked at the front of the garden center in March. That is going to be the reason some people walk past it without looking twice. And that is exactly the decision they will regret in 3 years, when they are trying to get warranty service on a machine that the manufacturer has already discontinued and replaced with a new model that has different parts and different support infrastructure. The 2265 is not trying to hit a price point. It is trying to be the last log splitter you buy, and based on what the people running it professionally are reporting about its longevity under working conditions, it has a legitimate claim to that promise. There is a quiet confidence in how Splitfire approaches the market that you do not see often in the equipment industry anymore. They are not running a countdown timer on a web banner telling you the sale ends tonight. They are not flooding comparison sites with affiliate-linked reviews written by people who have never touched the product. They are making a machine, standing behind it, and letting the performance speak over time. In an industry that has largely made peace with planned obsolescence, that is genuinely unusual, and it is worth paying attention to. What the 2265 teaches you, if you spend enough time with it, is that the best equipment almost never announces itself. It does not need to. The firewood dealer, who has been running the same machine for 7 seasons without a hydraulic failure, is not going to post a testimonial on the manufacturer's website. He is just going to keep running it, and when someone asks him what he uses, he is going to say the name without hesitation, and that is going to carry more weight than every advertisement the competitor ever bought. That is the ecosystem the 2265 lives in. It is the ecosystem of tools that earn their reputation by not breaking, by showing up in January when the temperature is in the single digits, and the pile is still half high, and there is no room in the schedule for a breakdown. Here is where everything lands. The Splitfire 2265 is a 22-ton horizontal and vertical gas-powered log splitter running a 208cc overhead valve engine with a 2-stage hydraulic pump and a 25-second cycle time, built for the property owner, the firewood dealer, or the working homeowner who has already paid the tuition on cheap equipment and has decided to stop paying it again. It is not the machine you find at the hardware store on a Saturday morning in spring. It is the machine you find when you stop shopping by brand recognition and start shopping by what the people who use this equipment every day for a living are actually running in their yards and on their properties. If you heat with wood, or if you sell firewood, or if you manage timber on any scale, this machine deserves a real look before you make a decision based on a display floor unit and a salesperson who has never split a cord. If you want to go deeper on what separates professional-grade splitting equipment from the machines, the big box stores are moving by the truckload. The next video on this channel lays it out side by side with real runtime data and no sponsored content anywhere in it. It is worth your time before you spend $1 you cannot take back.